Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to this QuickBooks Online Advanced Certification. This is now webinar 2. Thank you if you joined us yesterday. If you're first time here this morning, welcome. My name is Ros Hodgson. I am your QuickBooks trainer, certified trainer, practice owner based in High Wycombe, and it's a pleasure to have you with me this morning, this chilly morning. So just to refresh how this webinar is going to work this morning, you are all on mute. You should be able to hear me. What I'd like you to do now is practice going to your control webinar control panel on the right hand side, and you will see a hand icon. I'd just like you to raise your hand so I can see that you can hear me okay. Thank you very much, Julie, Mark, Tariq. Brilliant. So I know that you are all hearing me. If you are having any issues with sound, or if you're having or if you have any questions as the morning goes on, then also on that, go to webinar control panel over on the right hand side. There is a question mark bubble where you can put your questions in. Okay, so feel free to ask your questions as we go along, and one of the team will get back to you. Also, you'll see this morning that I will be using again the flashing concentric circles just to show you where I am at any time during the program. And of course, you can see my nice red pointer to help you follow me on the screen. So just a bit of housekeeping in terms of completing this course. You should have your exercise book available. You've got in there the exercises that we're going to go through. You've also got a workbook that's been provided for you to recap on any of the other information that's been given. Watch my screen. Please don't be tempted to do the exercises alongside me. Watch my screen, follow what I'm doing, get the understanding, and then go and try it yourself. We will give you time to those exercises as we go along. And then, like I said, ask the questions in the panel if you're stuck, if you need any further help. Use your workbook for any further learning. And at the end of this webinar, within about 2 or so hours, we will send you a recording. And that's really useful if you find that you're getting a little behind or something you haven't understood. You can go back, rewatch it so that you've understood clearly. So a really important reminder when it comes to gap access in your file this morning, remember that you're going to start in the accountant dashboard. That's where all of your client files are. Because you've all created them in the one accountant dashboard, you do need to make sure that before you start entering any data, you find your name. You can use the Find a Client box or search down on the list and then use the grey QB button to access your file. Should have your name on it. Once you've accessed your file, make sure you are in the accountant file and that it is the black menu on the left before you start entering any data today. And then again, double check that it is your name at the top of the file. So what did we do yesterday? Well, yesterday we looked at complex banking. If you recall, we looked at things like discrepancies on the bank feed and using that resolve difference button. And we also looked at ledger management, things like refunds, overpayments, payments on account, how to allocate payments after they've been on account. And then we've got the invoices in. So all that regular complex bookkeeping stuff that you will have with your clients. Then we did an introduction to reports and we looked at some of the functionality in the reports, including filtering. We looked at rows and columns where you could add, change, and we also looked at how you could schedule reports to go automatically to your clients. And then at the end of the day, we did the pre-work, and the pre-work was turning on the multi-currency in QuickBooks, and just that reminder that you can't turn it off. And then we imported all of the foreign currency elements that we're going to need at the end of this webinar. So we brought in the chart of accounts, we brought in bills and invoices, and we also brought in a US dollar bank feed. So that's what we did yesterday. Today, we're going to be covering classes and locations. We're going to be looking at projects, and then at the end of the morning, we will be looking at multi-currency. Okay, so that's on our agenda for today. So I'm going to start with classes and locations. I'm going to show you the settings for turning them on. I'm going to show you how we create subclasses and locations. We're going to look at how and why we would use them, and then we will run some reports using class and location. The first thing I'm going to do is go into my QuickBooks file, and as you see, I'm starting in my accountant dashboard. I'm going to start by going to clients, find my name on the list, and then access my QuickBooks file from here. Now, once that's loaded, we're dealing with classes and locations. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go and turn on those settings. These are settings that you can turn on and you can turn them off depending on your how your client business changes. So going up to my settings cog to account and settings under your company. So once that's loaded, I'm going to go on the left menu down to advanced. And then I'm going to this section here called categories. And you can see my track classes and track locations are currently off, and that's how they will be when you turn QuickBooks on. So I'm just going to click on the pencil and I'm going to turn on classes and I'm going to turn on locations. Okay. So under classes, we've got a couple of other options. The first one is to warn me when a transaction isn't assigned a class. So there's going to be an extra column that you're going to see, an extra field on every sheet or every transaction from now on. And do you want to be able to ignore it or not? Now, a really good scenario where you wouldn't want to ignore it is if you were doing using QuickBooks for doing property rental. And every transaction that you put through, you want it to be assigned to a property. And if it isn't assigned to a property, we call the others managing costs. So the other overhead, maybe their accounting bill, etc. You want everything assigned to, so everything has a class. And if you save a transaction where there isn't a class assigned, this will pop up and say you haven't assigned a class. You can override it, but if it's not necessary to have a class, you probably don't want it on because it will pop up every time you try and save a transaction. Okay, so I'm going to turn mine off. And then the other section is one to assign a class to each row in a transaction. Now we'll see this when we come to it. If you have that turned on, you can put on an invoice and assign a class to every line of that invoice, or you could have one class for the entire transaction. So those are two things to consider when you're turning on track classes. Track locations is nothing to consider here, either than on or off. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to save, and then I'm going to say done. So let's have a look at the impact of that. So if I go to sales and invoices, and in fact, let's take the shortcuts for us. So we're going to go new invoice. And now you see on the right hand side, because I've said I want a class per line, you can see that that class field is available here. Now, I haven't created any classes yet, but I can add a new class from here. Location, the only option was to have one location per transaction, which is why the location field is always above the detailed transaction lines. And again, I can add new from here. Right, so where I'm going to go now is show you where we've seen the shortcut that we can create the classes and locations from here, which is what you will do most of the time. However, I'm going to take you to where you'll find a list of them. So I'm going to go to my settings cog up here, and under lists, I'm going to all lists. And now because we've turned them on, you'll have classes here and locations here in the list. So if I go to classes, so why would you use classes and locations? Well, these are the departments that you want to use in your client's business, or the cost centers, or the geographic locations. Okay, so anytime you want to subdivide the numbers, this is when you would use classes and locations. Okay, so really great example of that, and I used it before, was of retail. Okay, so I could create a new property on here, which was, let's just call it property 1. Okay, you see I've got a subclass as well, but I'm going to use that in a minute. So this is property 1, maybe this is London Road, and within property 1, maybe there are 2 flats. So I can create another one that says flat 1, and now it becomes a subclass of property 1. Okay, and in flat 1 there are 2 tenants. So now I have tenant 1, and this is now a subclass of flat 1. And I could have tenant 2. Maybe tenant 1 sublets their room. So now I have sublet 1. And that is a subclass of tenant 1. So you can go 4 deep, okay, and you get the idea. This could be geographic, this could be London, this could be South London, and this could be, now I'm going to show my poor geography of London, this could be, all right, let's do North London. This could be North London, this could be Brent, and this could be Wembley. Okay, so you can code things per transaction, per class. So now when I go and put on an invoice and I choose the class, any one of those I could code at that level. Okay, so you can do that with classes, you can do that with locations. The big difference with locations, which I absolutely love, is it's designed, you don't have to use it for this reason, but it's designed to help you when you have what I call depots or more than one geographic location. So let me show you an example. So we've got an accounting firm and we've got a branch in, I've got to choose somewhere that I know the geography. Okay, so we've got a branch in Birmingham. Okay. Now what I can do is I've got a Birmingham office and a London office. I can say, if it's a sublocation, I'm not going to do that on this instance, but I can say every time I send out an invoice, it has a different title on the sales form, and it says BCAMS Birmingham. So every time I choose that location, my invoice now is going to say BCAMS in Birmingham. Okay, and it's going to have that when I communicate with clients. Okay, so I can have the same thing, that they know they're dealing with a different location, and I can have the address then added to that, and I can have a different email address. You get the picture. Okay, so I can have 1 Edgbaston Road. Don't know how to spell it, but I know it's definitely in Birmingham. Okay, so that's the difference when you set up a location. So now when I put an invoice on for a location and I say it's Birmingham, let's just pick a customer, that's a silly customer, let's have this one, and I say it was for this, and I save and I preview. It's now for BCAMS Birmingham and it's 1 Edgbaston Road. Okay, so that's the additional functionality that you get with locations. So what are we going to do this morning? So the setup that we're going to do is we're going to use an accounting firm. So if you think about, it might be your firm or other firms that you know where you've got more than one office. So in this instance, we're going to have an office in Leeds and an office in Leicester. Okay, and you've got more than one partner. So we've got Patrick and we've got Sarah, who are partners of this firm, and we do different types of work. So we do private work and we do commercial work as well. So what I want you to do is, in exercise 24, okay, we want you to turn on the classes and locations, okay, And then within location, we want you to create one of the offices, okay? So we want you to create the office for leads. So you're going to do that in locations. And then in classes, what we want you to do is we want you to create a class for the two partners. So one for Patrick and one for Sarah, okay? So all we want you to do is to create those, and then you're also going to create sub locations. So now with Patrick and with Sarah, who are partners, let's give you an example. So I've got Patrick, who is a partner. Patrick, we could now create, let's do this properly, he could be a sub-location of Birmingham. Yours is going to be Leeds. But what we're saying is Patrick works in Leeds. Okay, so what I want you to do now is go and just create the settings, and then we're going to put some transactions in. So turn on the settings, create the classes, create the locations, exercise 24, and we'll give you 6 minutes on that, please. Just remember that at the end of the exercise, I ask you just to raise your hand to let me know how you're getting on. And you can ask any questions in, well, not any questions, but questions relating to this in the GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side. So see you in 6 minutes. last minute on this, please? Thank you for those of you who've raised your hand. Do let me know that you're done. Thank you, Katie. We'll be back in just under a minute. So now that you've created those classes and locations, back on my screen, you can see under class, I've just now got commercial and private client. And if I go and look at my locations, I've got Leeds as my office, and I've got Patrick and Sarah as working out of the Leeds office. So now that I've set that up and I've shown you that on your transactions, I looked at an invoice, but also if I looked at a bill, you're going to see class, there's location at the top. If I look at a journal, I now have class and location on each line of that journal. Okay. Also now, if I go to reports, and I'm going to use the find a report by name, just go to my standard reports, and I'm just going to type in the word class, and you'll see the reports that you could have that are predetermined or preset reports that have class in it. But that doesn't mean they're the only reports that you can run by class. Now that class is turned on, lots of reports you'll just now be able to filter or change the format to view it by class. So let me look at let's look at location as well, actually, because there's several you'll see as well that you can run by location. So we go back to profit, just go back to class. You see that there is a profit and loss by class report. So again, really useful when you've got that information in, you'll see the different classes that are available. Now, I've just run mine for today. Even if I did mine for all dates, I've not put any classes in, so it's all going to show as unspecified. So that's your unclassified, if you like. But once we start putting data in or moving data, you will be able to get that really rich information. So let's do just that then. So if you think about a client, now often what happens is you set up a client, what they're doing is really straightforward. I like to give the example of a construction company, and then they start selling into maybe residential clients and commercial clients, and then you create those two classes just like we've done. And you may want to then go back and retrospectively change a transaction. Okay, so if I just go into fees, here are all the fees. If I just pick the top one up here for Carol Walker, I can now go in and say that Carol Walker's fee was a private client. Okay, and I can also say she was at the Leeds office and she was a client of Patrick. Okay, so I'll just change that one, save and close. So nothing's showing on here because I haven't changed the setup of here, but let me go back to my profit and loss by class report. Okay, so now you can see under private client, you can see the changes that I made for Carol Walker. And remember what I said about the depth that you've got in QuickBooks report. So this is a profit and loss by class, and here it's saying show columns by class. If I change that here to locations and then run my report, same information, but now I can see that I've got sales in here for her, for Patrick, and for Leeds by location. Even got one in for Birmingham. I should move that. That was my double bedding washes Do you remember that I did earlier? Let me take that out. Okay, so even though I ran a profit and loss by class, I was able to change the formatting of that report in a really straightforward way. Now, remember what I said about changing your dates on reports, I've done this for all dates, but if I just wanted to look at a specific date, remember you can do that in the report options. So if a client says, okay, I want you to go back and could you fix my accounts for a certain period and run it by profit and loss by class or location, I could go back and go, okay, I'm just doing this for last year or last quarter. Go to my report tool options. So I did accountant tools, report options, and I could set the parameters here. So you've got all the preset parameters, but also you could do a custom date as well. So if I did the 1st of April to the 31st of August, and then I could run my reports, all my P&Ls would be on that basis. First of April, 31st of August on this report because I preset the data, okay? So I've shown you how to change transactions one at a time, but imagine if you had to go back and change all of these individually. That would be a bit of a faff. I don't know if that's a word you use everywhere, but it would be a faff. So I'm going to show you how to group recode. And I'm going to go back to my accountant tools, and I'm going to use Reclassified Transactions, which you'll find under Tools. Love this tool. Two purposes in the way that we use this tool in our practice. One is as a review tool. So remember I set those dates as April to August. Now I've come into Reclassify. That's the only transactions it's going to show me. Of course, I can change it if I want to, but that's the parameters that I want to look at. Then I can choose to look at everything in my P&L or everything in my balance sheet. And beyond that, I can choose to look at an account at a time. So if I go to fees, select it on the right, and it will show all of the transactions for this period for fees on my right-hand side. So I can review that everything in here is gone to the right account. I can sort it by account. Has it gone to the right VAT code? I can sort it by any of these headers. I can also change them from here. So I select any that I want to change. Now, just one restriction here. When you're dealing with sales, anything that you've used a sales form for, sales invoice, sales receipt, sales credit note, you can't change the account here, okay, because the account comes from a service item or a stock item, okay? But what you can change here is the class, the location, and the VAT. So if all of these were at the wrong VAT code, I could select them, and then I select Reclassify, and then I can select which code, which VAT code it should have been, which class or location. And even though you do see the account field here, if I try to change this to a different income code and apply, it will tell me it can't do that here, okay? But I can do everything else. Once I get into the realms of the expenses though, which often actually, to be honest, are the ones that you most have to change because so much coding has gone on, and particularly if your clients are doing the books, this is where I love a description because it tells me that it tells me what they intended it to be, but often the customer as well or the supplier is a clue. But this is where you can now, I could recode this motor expenses, I could reclassify, and I could say it actually should have been, I have to pick something sensible. It actually was insurance, for example. And because it was insurance, it was also should have been exempt. And I can apply, and now it's gone. If I go into insurance, there it is. Okay. Now, a really good example would be if I looked at this and well, that can't be right. That can't be petrol in insurance. Let's put it back. It's a standard rated motor. Okay. So that's how you can use Reclassify to bulk recode transactions. And then you've got an even greater filter at the top here. You could just choose one supplier or one customer. Okay. So what I'd like you to do now in a minute is you're going to reclassify some transactions. But before you go, don't leave yet. I just want to show you what's happened to my reports. Okay. So if I go back to my profit and loss by class, it's running it for April to August. I'm just going to do all dates because I didn't. So you can see the transactions that are in private client. Now, if I had done even more, a really great report to run, if you've got lots of classes and lots of locations, is a summary report. So it's a custom summary report. I'll show you what that looks like. I'll show you where it is, where to find it. So if you go down to your business overview, you've got this report here called a custom summary report. Okay. I'm going to show it to you when it doesn't look great, and then I'm going to show it to you after we've moved the transactions when it will look great. Looks like a profit and loss. Looks like a profit and loss and for a set period. The difference here is we can configure the rows and the columns. Okay. So for the rows, you can choose class, location, customers, employees. For the columns, you can choose the same. I'm going to show you how it works, then you're going to have a go at moving your transactions and doing this yourself. So if I choose my rows as classes and my columns as locations and run this report, you get more of a table view. Okay. And you can configure this. It's a bit like a pivot table, same data, but looking at different ways. Okay. So come back to that report as part of your exercise. I want you to exercise 25 and 26, where you're going to move lots of transactions and then have a look at your custom summary report at the end. So exercise 25 and 26 and 6 minutes. Raise your hand if you're stuck or if you need any help. Ask a question and then raise your hand when you're done. See you in 6 minutes. We've got 1 more minute on these 2 exercises. Thank you for those who've raised your hands. Just let us know how you're getting on. Remember, the team's there to help you if you're stuck on anything. Thank you. Okay, so welcome back on my screen then. So you'll notice my dates have changed. So up in your report options, I changed the dates to the January to May. So now let's have a look at what your profit and loss should look like. See if my lovely shortcut is working. Let's just put class in. I want to play today. So I'm going to run my profit and loss by class. It's defaulted to May, January to May. And now you moved all the fees, didn't you, to private client? You move all the sales to commercial. In the P&L, you moved all the entertainment to commercial, and you moved all the payroll expenses to private client. So your P&L should look a bit like this. Don't worry if your numbers are slightly different. Remember, I have played around with mine a bit, but that's what your P&L should look like. I don't need to run a profit and loss by location. I can just go to display columns by, and I can change this to locations and run that report. And you can see that all of those fees went to Patrick and all of the sales went to Sarah. All of the entertainment there was Patrick, and the payroll expenses under Sarah. Okay, so in that instance, I looked at 2 different reports. How am I doing by class and how am I doing location? But remember, I talked to you about this custom summary report, and that basically combines the 2, a bit like a pivot table. So let's have a look at that one. I'm going to go back to my reports. I've saved mine up here as a favorite just by putting a green star on it. But remember, you find it in your business overview down here. So when I run my custom summary report, it looks just like a P&L. It's got the same parameters, but I can change what I see and how. So I could choose to have my classes as rows and my columns by locations, run my report, and it looks like that. So I can see private clients down the side and locations across the top, and I can see how Patrick has done for both commercial and private clients in this view, classes and locations. Got both. Flip them round, you could have locations and classes at the top, run the report. Yeah, same information, different view. Let's have locations by customer. Going to be a huge big list, but you get the idea. A bit like a pivot table, you just choose the parameters that you want. Okay, so I'm hoping that you have thought of clients that you have where this and the class and locations would be really useful for them. So just to recap then what we've covered. So for classes and locations, we looked at the settings. You turn them on, you know when you want to always use a class and when you don't. We looked at creating the subclasses and locations. Remember, Patrick and Sarah came under leads, and then the reports that we can run by class and location as well. So that's a brilliant time to take a break. It's 10:15. We'll have 5 minutes and we'll be back at 10:20. See you in 5. All right, welcome back. So in this next section, we're going to be looking at projects in QuickBooks, we'll check the settings. We're going to create a project and a budget for it, look at how the progress invoicing works. We'll allocate some costs to the project and look at our profitability of a particular project. So when you think about projects, I want you to think about back to our building company. So far, they have branched out and they've been able to track their commercial and their private clients. Then they start taking on much bigger jobs, and now they want to see the profitability on a job-by-job basis. And this is particularly where projects comes in, but I don't want you to limit that to construction clients, because there's lots of clients who do project work. You might have an insolvency company client that you need to deal with, where lots of resources are going. So how do we start using projects? Okay, so because we're using Plus, projects is automatically on, so there's nothing to turn on to get projects, but there is functionality that we want to use that is particularly useful. So I'm going to start at my settings, and I'm going to go to account and settings again. So this time I'm going to go and I'm going to start in my expenses. So this section here that says bills and expenses, this is about how you track your bills. So the element that I'm interested in here is this line here that says track expenses and items by customer. That's already on, and that means that when I put an expense through, I can say which customer it's for, but the next one is to be able to make it billable. So I can pass the cost on, and I could have a markup as well. And I'm going to choose to mark up any costs I pass on by 10%. I'm tracking those as income, those billable expenses, in one account, but you could have them in multiple accounts. And there's a little question mark there that tells you how that works. Okay? But that's all I'm interested in. I'm making them billable and I'm marking them up by 10%. The other thing that I want to just check is when it comes to my sales, I'm going to look at progress invoicing, and I want that to be on. And I want that to be on because I want to start invoicing for 10% or take deposits or part of a job at a time. So I acknowledge that I might have to update my invoice template, and I'm going to save. Okay. So I've got the settings that I need to do my projects. Now I'm going to go and create my first project. So I've gone over to my projects on the left menu, and the first time you come here to create a new project, you're just going to select Start a Project. So I have to say what the project's called and who the customer is. So in this instance, I'm building a pub called the White Horse, and it's for a customer called Charlie Whitehead, who does not yet exist because I'm starting from the beginning. I'm going to give him a quote. So I'm going to create him from here and add my new client. Okay. If I had other information, email address, etc., I could add it here. Just a warning, now that you're doing multi-currency, this is where you specify what currency the client is building. Once you set this, it can't be changed. Okay, so just be cautious. So I've created my project for Charlie. I could say when it starts and when it ends. I'm not going to. You can say the status of it. Again, if it's not started, completed, in progress, etc. And any notes. So this is a 2-story pub. I can't spell story, I don't know how to spell it. I'm just going to say it's a pub. Okay, and then save. So now this is the overview of the project screen. We'll look at that in some more detail in a moment, but first I want you to go and turn on those settings, and I just want you to go and create this project for Charlie Whitehead, please. So exercise 27 and 28, let's just get the framework ready and then we'll add to this project. So 4 minutes, please, on those settings. Lots of hands going up, thank you. You've got a minute left. Excellent. So you should now have this screen. The last thing you've done is created the projects. And from here, there are lots of things that we can do. On the top right, we can add to project. We can add an invoice, expense estimate, etc. And we'll have an overview of the costs, the income, and the profit. The first thing we're going to do now, excuse me, is we're going to create a budget for this project. Excuse me, and that's one thing we cannot do from within here. Go into my settings, top right, and under tools, near the bottom, you will see budgeting. So we're just effectively doing a costing exercise for this budget. So first thing is to add a budget from here. Excuse me. So I'm going to name the budget the White Horse. And then I'm going to select which year it's for. So I'm going to leave it at 2022. However, you can create a budget for the year. So there's 2022. I can do the year before, the current year, or I can go up to 5 years in the future. Okay. Now, what I can't do with my budget is I can't import data from an Excel sheet, but I'm going to show you how you can quickly add and change that data. So the interval that you select here is about the interval of input, not the interval of output. So I'm going to choose to put my quarterly figures in. And when it comes to pre-filling, what it's referring to is, do I want to start from scratch and just enter my figures manually? Or do I want to pull in the actual figures for last year and manipulate those? Or do I want to use the actual for the current year? So I'm going to start from scratch. And then the subdivide, who is this budget for? Don't subdivide, I'm doing a whole company budget if I choose that. Whereas I could also choose to put it in for a customer, class, or location. Excuse me, frog in my throat. So I'm going to choose a customer, and we know that the customer is Charlie Whitehead, and in particular, the White Horse. So that's selecting the project. Okay, once I've done that, it will confirm that that's who the budget's for. Nothing to enter on the first page. You cannot enter data here. Okay, bottom right, next. And this is where you enter your data. Okay, so you can see the blue square here, the square with the blue arrow. I'm going to go to sales, and I'm going to say I'm expecting to do £25,000 in this quarter, and in fact in every quarter. So rather than entering it again, where I am here, I just use the blue arrow and it will copy it across. If I go back, it will undo. Okay. If I want to increase the value, if I go to the next one and say, remember this is a calculator field, I could say multiply that 25 by 1.2 and tab, and it will increase it for me. Okay. So once I've done that, I'm just going to enter the figures for my budget. So you can see everything's in there. There's my cost of sales. If there are too many lines on here that you don't want, okay, I'd only recommend doing this when you're finished. I'll give you an example. So let's put my materials in. It's really useful when you're reviewing your budget. You know, there's lots of blank lines, and I could get to the very bottom and see my net income. But also what I can do, there is a little settings button up here, top right. In this, I could hide the blank rows, so I'm only seeing my input, really useful when I'm checking. But I could also see the impact of my budget monthly. I could look at it for the full year. I've got those hidden. It all went in the last column. So really useful when you've put all your data in and you want to check your budget. So I'm going to save and close. When it comes to checking your whole budget, next to your budget, you've got a drop-down button. I recommend the budget overview report. That shows you your full budget that you can then print out. But also we can run a budget versus actuals report once we've got some data in here. If you want more than one version, you could copy it and have version 1, worst case scenario, best case scenario, or delete it. Okay. Excuse me, I will have a drink in a minute. So what I want you to do now is to go ahead and put your budget in. You can go to settings and budgeting and create your first budget, please. Exercise 29, give you 4 minutes on that, please, while I take a drink. Got a minute left. Okay, so now you're done that, you should have under your budget tab the white horse for January to December 2022, and it's there ready for us to use and compare once we've got some data. So I'm going back to my projects now. Got rid of most of the frog of my throat. So I'm on the project overview page now. So once you've got more than one project, you'll see a list of them here, and you'll see the status and the income and costs for each. So from here, you can also mark it the progress of your project. So I'm just going to go into the white horse and we're going to start entering some data. So remember, we can add transactions from here. So natural flow, I'm going to create an estimate for the client, and then I'm going to put some costs on for this client as well. So I'm going to add to the project, and I'm going to start with an estimate. So the client is the white horse, and we're going to create an estimate that's going to be available for a year. Okay, so I'm going to leave it as today's date, and I'm just going to put the date in. So I'm going to make it the 6th of December 23. And so automatic estimate number. So what am I going to give them an estimate for? Well, I've said that the labour, 60,000, and some materials. So £100,000 estimate plus VAT, £120,000. If I had their email address, I could save and send, but I don't. So I'm just going to save and close that estimate. Just notice up here, it's marked as pending. And if they accepted it, I could put who it was accepted by and the date. Okay, let's just complete it. Okay, so got one estimate, still no change in the values here. But if I go to transactions now, I can see my one estimate there, which has been accepted. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is they've accepted my estimate, and I've gone and bought some materials, and I want to allocate those costs to this transaction, to this project rather. So I'm going to go and find that expense. So I'm going to look in my suppliers, and I know that it's an expense by one of our subcontractors. Okay. So I've had a bill for £3,000 from John Boy for labour and materials. Okay, maybe he's a subcontractor. And all I'm going to do, remember we turned on the make expenses billable. That's this box here. We turned on the ability to add a markup and to also be able to pass that on to a customer. So all of these costs I'm going to mark as billable. It will calculate or let me know that I'm going to charge a 10% markup. If I wanted to charge more, if he'd give me a bit of a runaround and I'd had to go take the materials back, I could mark that up more. But I can put this now to the white horse. What you will also see, this is doing my cost per project. I could also say, if I wanted to, that this was a commercial project. So I could use the class as well. If I wanted to, I could say that this was in, if I wanted to look at it geographically, it was in Leeds. So I've marked those as billable, assigned them to the project. Now I'm going to save and close. Going back to my projects. There's my overview already from the front page, and go into the project. And now I can see some costs of goods already, negative profit, obviously, because I haven't got any income. If I go to my transactions, I can now see not only the estimate, the billable expense charge, waiting to recharge him, and the bill. Okay, so we're starting to see some data. And at the top, there's a summary and no outstanding invoices as yet. So your turn now, exercise 30 and 31. Give you 5 minutes, please, to put on that estimate and also to allocate those costs to the job. Back in 5. Last minute, thank you. Okay, so what have you done so far? You have got a new client, created a budget for them, worked out that it should be a profitable client. You've sent them the estimate. They've accepted the estimate. And we've already started allocating some costs to that client from John Boy. We've got no time activity as yet, but if we look at the project reports, we can look at a profitability report here, which is going to tell us that we've spent some money, we're making a loss, but we haven't invoiced them yet. If I go back to my project details here, go back to my project reports, there are no time costs by employee because we know we haven't put any time in yet. But if I look at my unbilled time and expenses, it says you've spent, not only have you spent £3,000 on materials, but the markup on that is £150 each, making the 3,300 that I'm yet to bill for the client. Okay, it's a really good way of keeping track of expenses that you've incurred that you need to bill your clients for. Remember, you could use this in your firm, it's not just your clients. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is, now that we've started having some costs, is we want to start invoicing the client for some of the work that we've done. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, from add to project up here, I'm going to now create an invoice. Okay, so as soon as I create an invoice, because I've done it from the project, it automatically is going to default to Charlie Whitehead. And on the right hand side, I've got this drawer that has opened with anything that I've done so far associated with the White Horse and Charlie Whitehead. There's my estimate, and there are the two billable expenses, which it has split because you may not want to recharge it all at the same time. What I'm doing is I'm just going to add the estimate first. So when I choose to add it, because I've turned on progress invoicing, it wants to know, am I going to invoice them for all of it, a percentage of each line, or a custom amount for each line? Okay, so I'm going to choose to invoice 25% of it. Okay, it's very common in construction. I'm going to change that to 25% of each line. If I wanted to do 50% of one and 20 of the other, I would use the custom line for each transaction. Okay, so once I've done that, I'm going to copy that to my invoice. Okay, so I'm about to invoice them for £30,000. Now, because this is a construction client, what's quite common is something called retention. If you're not familiar with retention, it means that somebody builds you an extension, or it's more common in commercial, to be honest. So someone builds a building, but the contractor says, we'll withhold 5%, let's say, of the building costs. And after 3 months, if the building's still standing, if there's no snagging issues, we'll release the 5%. It means that if there are issues, you're inclined to have to come back and fix them, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to add retention to this. So the first thing I want to do is the retention. I just want to charge on the value of the items above. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a subtotal for my invoice. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the line that I want the subtotal below, and underneath you can see next to clear and add lines, you've got add a subtotal. Okay, so what that will do is then it will create a subtotal of £25,000 for the work that's done so far. Now what I want to do is I want to add retention, which is going to come off this invoice. Okay, so from here I can create an item called retentions. I've already created mine, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So remember, yesterday I said that service items are not just for stock and real service items, if you like, but you can use them to create, to deal with some complexities in your clients. If I go to sales and products and services, I'll show you the retention item that I've already created. and it's really straightforward. So I've got retentions at 5%. I've got the description as retention, and I've said it's going to be minus 0.5. That's how I'm going to calculate the 5% of it. And I've got it going to an account called retentions, which is a current asset. So it's going on my balance sheet to say that I am owed this money, okay? And it is vatable in the same way that the labour and materials are vatable, okay? So if I go back to my invoice, I'm going to add my retentions here, and it's going to calculate minus 0.5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the subtotal in here where it says quantity, and it will calculate 5% as a negative of the £25,000. That is attributable, and so my balance due is 28,500. Don't worry, when we ask you to do this, we show you how to create that retention code. Okay? So now that I've done that, I'm going to save and close. And now on my project, you can see the income, less the cost, and my current profit as well. So I'd like you to have a go at doing that conversion on exercise 32, and I'll give you 4 minutes on that, please. This time on the slide, you will also see how to create that retentions. Just go, you can do it straight from within the invoice. Just start typing retentions and you can follow this, and it is a service item. So see you back in 5 minutes. Did I say 4 minutes? Another 30 seconds on that, please. Okay, welcome back. So lots to do in this section. You've now converted that invoice, the estimate, to an invoice. I just want to point out on that invoice, as you may be wondering, how would it look when we add that billable expense? Okay, so if we were going to recharge, remember these were the expenses from John Boy. If I decided to add one of those to this invoice, on the actual invoice, you'll see the original cost plus the markup. But if I save and preview it, now I've not configured my invoice template, but just to give you an idea, you won't actually see that markup on the invoice. You'll just see the 1650. So it's added the 330 into the cost, but it's not showing the markup on there. And I haven't changed the VAT, but just so that you know what it would look like on that invoice. Okay. I'm going to take that off, and it will ask me, do I want to unlink it? I'm just going to unlink it, and it will go back to the side. Okay. So now that you've done this element of it, we can see we're currently making an 88% profit margin, but clearly there's lots of work that we haven't yet done, but it's good to have that overview of our profit. Okay, so let's see how we're doing against what we had actually projected. So we've had a quick look at the project reports before. Let's see how we're doing now. So now my profitability, I can see my sales so far, my cost of sales, I can see my net income of £22,000. But how am I doing against my budget? Okay, so I'm going to go back to my gear icon and go to my budgeting. And from here, I'm going to run my budget versus actuals report. Right, so when you run the budget versus actual report, it will run it for the whole company. I need to tell it that I'm only interested in Charlie Whitehead, okay? And I want to choose how and what I see. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to customize this report. So the first thing that I want to do in my report is you could change the date period, but I'm going to leave mine as 2022. You've got this area here for rows and columns. Now before, remember yesterday, it was just about adding and changing rows and columns. Now it's about the grid on a project, on a budget report. So it says, what do you want to see on your grid? So think about your custom summary report. It's very similar to that. Anything that's on the left is going down on the, the vertical. Anything on the right is the horizontal. So do you want to see your accounts versus customers, or your customers against months, or your customers against quarters? You get the general idea, okay? So I'm going to choose to see my accounts on the vertical and the months going across the page, okay? So, or you could see amounts. Let's do amounts versus totals, okay? Choose what comparisons you want. Do you want to see how much they're over or under budget as well? Okay. but that's still going to show me the whole company. So I'm going to go to the filter and I'm going to say the only customer I want to see is Charlie Whitehead, the white horse. Okay, then I'm going to run my report. So I've changed the grid. I haven't changed the period of comparison, but you can, and I've filtered my report. So now when I run my report, I'm just getting my actuals, my budget, and how much I'm over or under budget at the moment. Okay, so I'm well under my sales, and I've got lots of margin left on that. So I'm going to save it. Although it's created it with these semicolons, it doesn't like to save them with semicolons. So I'm going to use the pencil, and I'm going to call it something much simpler. Let's just call it the white horse budget. Budget versus actuals. Okay, click away. Now when I save my customization, I could add it to a group, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to let it save as that, and I'm going to save that report. Okay, remember you'll find that report in reports, and now in custom reports, there's my actuals versus budget report. Okay, so I'd like you to have a go at that exercise 33, please, and we'll give you 3 minutes just to run that budget report and save it, please, and also check your profitability. Last minute here, please. Just raise your hands. Let us know how you're getting on, please. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. That was a short one. So what should be showing in your project profitability report, which I have great difficulty saying? So if I go to my project, well, the overview tells me £22,000. I go to my project report and run my project profitability. Yeah, net income of £22,000. Okay. And you should also now have in your report section a custom report called the White Horse budget versus actual report. Okay. So we've gone through most of the transactions that you would need to do in a project, looked at the overview, the different reports, etc. Obviously, if we'd had hours, you would see them in there. You can track your hours within QuickBooks and mark them billable, and then that's going to show on the budget as well. You can also put in your cost rate as well. Now, while we're talking about time, time is one of those things that you have to allocate carefully because not everybody's time is billable, and you might have people on your payroll like project managers and you want to allocate their costs to a project but not all of their salary. So another example of that is materials that you've bought and you've got in stock, or the client has got in stock, and then they take some of those to use on a particular job. So I'm going to show you how you reallocate costs to a project when that's not the original purpose of that time or cost per se. So what I'm going to do is what we call, if you like, a zero. It used to be called a zero check when people send checks out. So I'm going to create a new expense in this instance. It's going to go to suppliers and expense. And I'm going to deal with materials that were bought, loads of bricks, and we've taken a portion to work on this particular job. Now, where it says payee, you don't have to put anything in here. Just be aware that when you do the review, it might pop up. So you might want to have a generic name like, reallocation or something like that. So on this actual expense, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put materials in, and I'm going to put the value of materials of £500. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to allocate this to this project. So there's no VAT involved here. Okay. I'm going to put it as billable. Okay. And then I'm going to put it to the White Horse project. So I'm assigning it to that job. Now, depending on the client, you may or may not want to have a markup on it. But that's how, depending on how your clients work. Now, obviously, I don't want to put an expense on for £500. I haven't spent £500. So I'm going to go to materials again. And this time I'm going to go minus 500. Still no VAT. I'm just moving that cost. And that, when I bought the materials, it wouldn't have been allocated to a project. So I'm leaving that blank. So all I'm doing is moving it from no customer or project and assigning it to a customer project. And I end up with a zero expense. As I've said yesterday, I don't like zeros on my bank, so I tend to use the contra bank and then save and close. You can see my profit's gone down. You can see that if I look at my transactions, I've got that zero expense on here. If I look at my project and costs, my project profitability is now 21,500. So this is your last exercise, is exercise 34, and we'll give you a couple of minutes just to reallocate those costs, please. Exercise 34. Last minute on that, please. All right, so the answer in that box should have been 21,500 revised profit. So well done if you managed to get that. So just to recap then on what we've done projects, then we're going to take a break, our last one of the day. So we've looked at the advanced settings for projects. Remember, we went and turned on make expenses and items billable. We added the markup and we turned on progress invoicing. We created a project for Charlie Whitehead. We created a budget for him. We did an estimate that we then turned into an invoice, and that was our progress invoice where we just did a percentage. We allocated costs to the invoices from scratch, and then just from taking a transaction and changing it, we reallocated them from one to the other, and then we looked at the profitability reports. So we're going to take the last of our 2 5-minute breaks now. That's 11:17, so we'll be back at 11:22, and then we'll look at multi-currency. See you in 5. Welcome back. So in this last section of day 2, we're going to be looking at multi-currency, the settings, how to edit the rates, how QuickBooks calculates the gains and losses, and how and when, why you would use contra accounts for multi-currency. So as usual, I'm going to start in the settings. Now, we did this yesterday, but I just want to recap that in terms of turning on your multi-currency, go to Account and Settings and Advanced, and you need to just double check that your multi-currency is turned on. If you have not turned it on, you're not going to be able to do the exercises in the next section. I wouldn't recommend that you do it now, but I would recommend that you watch, follow along, and then go and turn it on, because you also have to import certain transactions as well. So don't try and do that now. Okay, so multi-currency, you can see mine is turned on, and once it's on, there is no off button. Once it's on, it cannot be turned off, and the home currency becomes fixed. From here, I'm going to go to the Manage Currencies link, but I also could do that from my settings and lists. So from your lists here, you'll see at the bottom currencies, and take you to exactly the same place. Okay? And this is where you would add any other currencies that you may want to use as default currencies. And you can see that that list is very, very, very long, and almost all the currencies are there. So when it comes to dealing with transactions in QuickBooks, we know multi-currency is turned on. So if I go to an invoice of a customer that I've created in a different currency, you'll see that you've got this box here. Okay, so I can change the currency exchange for a customer on the transaction. I can change it on the payment, or within the currency center itself, I can edit the currency from here. Now, the currencies are bought in, they're imported every day, so they're updated, I think, at 2 a.m. every morning, and from market. Okay, it just slipped my mind. So yeah, so the currency are updated automatically. If you wanted to override that currency for globally for your whole company, you would come here, you would change the, you can't change the market rate, but you can change your rate, and you can put your rate in here. Now, you'd only do that if you want that rate company wide, and remember that rate will then be fixed until you come back and change it. Okay, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use the rates that come through from market every day. These actually came through at 10 a.m. this morning. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start dealing with some of the transactions that we've got in our banking that have been in a different currency. Yesterday, I imported the US dollar bank account, for which I have 2 transactions in here. One is a payment and one is a transfer to the GDP account. So I'm going to deal with this transfer first. Okay, so I'm going to go to this transfer. I know it's gone to the GDP account. So at the top here, where I would normally categorize or match, I'm going to choose record as a transfer. At that point, I have to tell it where it's going, and I know it's going to the GDP account. So I'm going to tell it it's going to the business current account. Now, I either have to tell it how much it is in the GDP account, or I have to tell it the rate. Now, how much is it in the GDP account? You ask. So I'm going to go, remember I duplicated my screen. I'm going to go back to banking and see how much was it in the GDP account. Well, here it is, a transfer from the US dollar account of 2,500, and it's come through at 1910. So as soon as I change this amount, the conversion rate will automatically update. Okay, so it updates to 0.764. Okay. Now, if I didn't know that, and I only knew the rate, I could change the rate, and that's how much it would appear in the GDP account. But we do know, and normally you would know. Okay, So now I can go ahead and add this transfer. And if I go to my business bank account in sterling, it's now matched. And I can go ahead and match that as well. Okay, so nice and straightforward. Another straightforward transaction that I want to deal with is we've received payment here from a euro customer. Okay, sometimes charges are taken off the payment, but there haven't been any charges taken off in this instance. But what has happened is the euro customer has paid in sterling. When it comes to multi-currency, at least one of the transactions needs to be in the home currency. I'll show you later what happens if one of them isn't, but this one is. So we've got £848 from the euro customer. Let's see how much they actually owed in euros. I'm going to go to sales and customers, and I'm going to look up my euro customer. Okay, so they've paid, they owed €1,000, and I've got the remittance, and I know that they've paid both of them. So I'm going to record this payment into my sterling bank account. If I had a euro bank account, I could put it in the euro bank account, but I can't put it straight into the dollar bank account. So I'm going to receive payment against these. I'm going to select both of them. So it's €100. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I do know the amount that it's come through, and I could change the exchange rate, but you don't always. Often what happens, you get a remittance to say they've paid, and they've paid on a certain date. So what I'm going to say is here, the payment date is the 24th of May. Okay. And on that date, the system rate is 0.853, GDP of 853.48, and then I'm going to save and close. Okay, so I've recorded the payment of that. Now when I go back to the banking screen, payments finally come through, and maybe it's come through on a different date, and so the exchange rate is different on that day. So what I want to do is match this to the amount that they have paid. So I'm going to select my euro customer as I normally would. I'm going to do find match as I normally would. And I'm going to search for euro customer, and it isn't going to come up, and that's because they are a foreign currency customer. So what I have to do is change the option here from home currency to foreign currency, and here is the payment that they had made. Okay, so I'm going to do find match, or match that payment, and it's going to recalculate the home currency. Okay, I could have also just done a find match and match to the invoices and overrid the other step if you wish. So it depends on the timing difference that's happening for the client. Okay, so now I go ahead and save. And that's gone. Now let's see what's actually happened to that transaction. So I'm going to go to the actual payment here. And what's happened is now the payment has been updated for the new exchange rate. Okay, so remember we had one value here. Now the actual banking has happened. It's updated the exchange rate for the payment. If I go to the More button on the payment and look at the transaction journal, it's also calculated the gain or loss on this transaction. And that's because those invoices had a value when they were entered at a certain date, and they had a different value, if you like, when the payment was made, and there was a currency fluctuation. So effectively, there was a gain made because originally the debtor in sterling was 835. I actually got 848, so I made a gain of £12.76 on that transaction. Okay, and so you see the gain or loss on the payment, and then you have to go to the More button and look at the transaction journal. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is to do the transfer that I showed you, starting at the dollar account. and then match it, and then I'd like you to record the payment against that those euro invoices. So exercise 35 and 36, please, and we'll give you 4 minutes on those two. Last minute, please. Okay, so welcome back. My gain or loss on that euro customer was £12.76. And in my dollar bank account, I just have one item left. And I've just got 3 items left in my business bank account now. And so the next item that we're going to deal with is, excuse me, the next item that we're going to deal with is we're going to deal with this payment here. So we've been paid by our dollar customer, and we've got £770, but this time a charge has actually been deducted. Okay, so our dollar customer paid us $1,000. That $1,000 equated to, because I've got the remittance in front of me, you just can't see it, equated to £785. The bank took off £15, as they're prone to, in charges. So how can I deal with that? I'm going to start with my actual transaction from the bank. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to split it. Okay, so at the bottom here, I'm going to choose to split. And I'm going to tell it that the currency is US dollars. Okay, that's going to open up all the functionality for me and the US dollar ledger. Okay, now I do know, because I've got the remittance in front of me, that I got £785. It was $1,000. Okay, so I know that my rate is 0.785. Okay, the next thing that I know is that who it was received from, it was the US dollar customer. Okay, and because I want it to go on the customer's ledger, the category that I'm going to choose is the debtors for US dollars. So once you've got multi-currency, you've got multi-currency debtors. So it's debtors US dollars. Okay, because it's a payment, it's no VAT, and it's on the sales. Okay, we're not interested in the class location. Okay, and we know the amount of dollars that we got. It was 1,000. Okay, right. So now we know that we got $1,000. We know the rate is 7.85. Okay, and so there's a difference of 1911, which is the dollar equivalent of our £15 bank charge at that rate. Okay, so where it says receive from, you can leave that blank. If you know, I like to put my bank in because that's who who we bank with. But you can leave that blank, and then here I'm going to put that it was a bank charge, which is what it was. Okay, bank charges are exempt. And the amount I'm going to put in, because remember this is all in dollars, is the negative of this amount here. So minus 1911. So now it's 0. The US dollar equivalent is 980 plus the bank charge. Okay, so there's my £1,000 gone to my debtors. So now I'm going to apply and accept. Okay, so now if I go to my dollar customer, there's the deposit, there's the invoice, it's paid in full. So I just do the receive payment. I'm going to allocate the invoice against that deposit. Leave the date is correct. So I've got a 0 transaction. It's just an allocation. Remember, I created my allocation payment method, and I'm going to save and close. Okay. I want you to try that now. So you're going to start at the bank. You're going to find the transaction that's on there. I think it's on there at 770. You're going to open it up, and you're going to find bottom right. You're going to use a split and follow the information in the exercise. So exercise 37 will give you 4 minutes on that, please. Remember, if you get stuck, team's there to give you a hand. Just ask your questions in the GoToWebinar control panel. How are you getting on? Got a minute left, but if you're stuck, do let the team know, and I'm sure they'll get back to you ASAP. So just under a minute. Well done, you're doing great. So my business bank account, I should have 2 transactions left now and just 1 in my dollar account, okay? So the next thing that I'm going to deal with is I'm going to deal with what happens when a euro customer pays in dollars or a dollar customer pays in euros or any other currency that you might have dealt with, okay? So if I go to my dollar account here, you can see that I have a payment from a euro customer, and that's an issue that we need to deal with. I'm going to use the contra bank account, okay? And we use that because the contra bank account is in home currency, right? It's in GDP. So I'm going to use that as an intermediary between the dollar and the euro account, okay? So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this supplier account. I'm going to go to my expenses and my suppliers. And I've got this euro supplier. And this euro supplier owes us £2,000, okay? So this supplier pays in full, okay? So I'm going to deal with this, receiving this money, and I'm going to, our client pays in full, okay? So they make a payment, and they're making a payment for all of these bills, okay? So 2,000 euros, okay? But the first thing here is that I can't put it to, they didn't pay into the US dollar account, they paid into the, didn't pay in the sterling, they paid into the dollar account. If I try and save and close, it won't let me, okay? So I'm going to use my contra account, okay? So again, I know how much they have paid, okay? And I know the equivalent of what they paid is 1708.80, which isn't that. So I'm going to change my exchange rate to the right equivalent. Now, if you don't know how to do that, I'll put the rate in for you. Okay. I'm going to update this. It's only for this transaction only. And now I've got 1708.80, which is how much they paid. It's really important that you know that to do this next step. Okay. So the date of payment, 24th of May, I'm paying it into the contra account, and I've said in sterling, I'm expecting 1707.80. Okay. And I'm going to save and close. Now, where that money has been received is in my US dollar account. What's been received is 2350 in dollars. So what I'm going to do now is transfer this also to the contra account. I'm going to record it as a transfer to the contra account, okay? But what I need for this to be is the sterling equivalent that we actually received, okay? Which was 1707.80. So you can see what I'm doing. I've matched them on both sides into that sterling account, okay? So I'm transferring that to my sterling account and add. So it sounds complicated, but it isn't when you look at it like this. I go to my dashboard now. Here's my contra account. And here are my 2 transactions in the middle. Okay, nice and straightforward. So have a go at that one. I'll give you 3 minutes on that. You're going to record a payment into the contra account override the exchange rate, then you're going to do a transfer from the dollar account into the contra account and override the value to the same amount. Have a go. Exercise 38, you're almost there. Well done, you're almost there. Last minute on this one, please. Then one more exercise to do. So welcome back. The contra account is your friend. I think in almost every client that we have a contra account. You will find a good use for it over and over again. Zero payments, contras between debtors and creditors. You know, so many uses where you don't want those zeros on your bank. So I checked mine on the dashboard, made sure it was zero. It sounds more complicated than it is, that contra account. It's just you have to make sure in the contra bank account that the amount is the sterling equivalent of the euros and of the dollars. Okay. So last thing I want to do is show you how you revalue the currency and the impact of foreign currency on your P&L and balance sheet. So if I run my profit and loss report, you will see that at the very bottom, this is where your exchange gain and losses go, okay, down the bottom. So they hit your P&L. You'll also notice that we've got unrealized gains or losses, and that's to do with the revaluation of your currency on your balance sheet. So if I run my balance sheet, you'll see that I've got debtors, but I've also got euros and dollar debtors possibly as well. And also I've got a US dollar bank account. Now this balance sheet is in sterling and it's showing the sterling equivalent of that money as of this date based on the exchange rate in that date in QuickBooks. When I get to the year end, the exchange rate might be completely different. And also if I had euro debtors or creditors, the value of that debtor or creditor could be changed because of the exchange rate that's in operation as of that date, which is why we use this revaluation tool to calculate what is the actual value based on today's date. But because that money hasn't been actually spent or those debtors haven't been received, that gain or loss is not a real gain or loss, it's an unrealized gain or loss. So it's going to sit down here on my P&L. So after the accounting lesson is over, let's see how we do it. So go to my settings at the top. I'm going to go under list to currencies. And here you'll see that I've got my dollars and euros. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to revalue my euros, drop down button here and revalue currency. Okay, what's my revaluation date? So you could choose your year end. I'm going to choose the 1st of June. What's my revaluation rate? So if you have a set rate, you can choose it, or you can use the system date. Okay, and it's going to tell me that the US dollars that I had were worth this amount in sterling before. Now they'd revalue to 1601. The cash in hand that I had, which I have in dollars, don't know why I did that, but cash in hand in dollars was worth 202, now it's worth 120. If I go to the bottom and save and revalue, let's go, let's look at our reports. So I'm going to go to my profit and loss, go to the bottom, let's run this for all dates, and that's my unrealized gain or loss, okay? And it's what you call, so there you are, it's telling you which debtors, which creditors, and which journals have been revalued, okay? And in this one this is it, and it's a placeholder only, okay? So money hasn't actually changed, it's just a placeholder. Okay? If you wish in the following period, you could reverse that. Last exercise for you, couple of minutes, exercise 39, go ahead and revalue your dollars. Be back here in a couple of minutes and then we'll wrap up for the day. Last minute on that. Welcome back and well done. So your P&L should have that revalued or unrealized gain or loss at the bottom if you look at it for all dates. Okay, mine was 2011. Don't worry if yours is slightly different, that's fine, but you know how to do that. So that's it for today. Well done. Just to recap then on what we covered, we looked at the settings for multi-currency just now. We've edited the rates and shown you that we can do that on each transaction globally. We've shown the gain or loss calculation on realized and unrealized gain or loss, and how and why we use the contra accounts. So you've covered a lot today. You've done classes and locations, probably seemed like a long time ago. You did projects and all those exercises for Charlie Whitehead, and you've also done multi-currency. Huge well done. So tomorrow we'll look at retail, managing stock, we'll look at VAT and run some management reports. So thank you for joining me for day 2. Thank you to the team for answering all your questions, and I'll see you back here tomorrow at 9:30. Enjoy the rest of your day.